The topic I gave you was Ask Dad, He Knows. And for those
Hmm.
in the audience that have been alive long enough to remember, this was a popular sign way back in the day. And you'd see it at gas stations, and you'd see it in Wall Street, and you'd see it in rural places. Ask Dad, He Knows. And so I wanted to talk about the role of fathers, and particularly for Father's Day, but in general, the role of fathers has changed. In the last 14 and a half months with this new culture, this new wave and feeling and tension and cloud in the air that we call coronavirus. Fathers have had to take on new roles I'm sure they didn't expect to have to take. And some males who aren't even fathers have become fathers, surrogate fathers. I'm one myself, and so I like to start by reading something that my father gave me when I was a boy. It's very famous. It's Rudyard Kipling's If. I still have the actual copy he gave me, and I actually have it committed to memory, but I'm going to read it because I think it looks better on camera. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies. Or being hated, don't give way to hating. And yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. If you can dream, but not make dreams your master. If you can think and not make thoughts your aim. If you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat these two impostors just the same. If you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop and build them up with worn out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it all on a turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again from your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And, which is more, you'll be a man, my son. And that's a tall list of virtues that Rudyard Kipling put in what is now considered a famous poem. My father gave it to me as something to aspire to. And while I certainly have aspired to those things, particularly starting out in a monastery, we're taught that less is more and that other people are more important than we are, and never get angry and never hold on to anger. And if you lose, be quiet. If you win, be quiet. Don't announce yourself. These are things I learned at 17 and still practice at 58. You can imagine my struggle, if you want to call it that, with our current world, which likes to publicize everything and make everything a matter of public knowledge. But I didn't grow up this way, and I was taught by my father that it's best to be quiet unless you have something that's useful to contribute, that's positive and uplifting. Well, today's culture is very good at doing the opposite. And this is not me passing judgment. One simply has to open one's eyes and ears and notice that there's a lot of angry and opinionated people who like to have that opinion shouted from the rooftops, or posted on their Instagram or Facebook page. But this very poem, If, talks about just the opposite, that being a man, being a father, being a good male role model is to have integrity, to have a sense of personal values where your word means something and your handshake means something. So, out of the 10 things that over the years I've written down that my father taught me growing up, I picked three to talk about today. Um, I could have picked more, but everyone listening to me knows I can go on much too long. So, my first one is look a person in the eye. Always look someone in the eye. Consequently, when you look someone in the eye and you shake his or her hand, do both at the same time. And my dad would always actually practice this. He'd take his hand and he would pull his hand out. And there's a way to shake hands and a way not to shake hands. You don't grip too hard and you don't grip too loose. It's right in the middle. And you shake the hand and you look in the eye all at the same time when you speak or when you meet someone. And he taught me that this is something that you do with love and firmness, and yet it instills confidence. And if you can't do those things, don't shake hands or simply remove yourself from the situation. Look a person in the eye is an old-fashioned way of saying that you're a man or a father or a person of your word, and what you are saying is a matter of heart conviction. It's a matter of value, and you mean it. You're sincere, you're authentic, you're genuine, and I can be trusted. All of that's conveyed by looking a person in the eye. Now, you probably can guess where I might be going next. In our current world, we rarely do this. Now, interestingly, in the past 14 months or so, with the masks, all many of us have seen are the eyes. So it's interesting that we've been placed in a situation. But if you'll watch human behavior, even in places where people are wearing masks, they won't look you in the eye, which makes it even more difficult if you're trying to figure out what's going on with them and or in their life or what they're trying to say. And so it's ironic. If my dad were living, he'd find this really funny, actually, that we've come to this looking at someone in the eye, that the eyes really are the mirror or the window of the soul. They can convey how a person really feels or doesn't feel. Now, in my clinical world as a psychotherapist, I've said this before, people say things with their mouth to me in confidence and in privacy, but really it's their eyes and it's their body that communicates so much more of the truth of what's really going on. And I often rely on what I see in their eye. And sometimes it's difficult for me to get them to look me in the eye because of that big word that we all know about, and it's called shame. A lot of people in the country, a lot of people on the planet, they are riddled with shame. And shame and guilt and regret are all in the same genre, but shame is at the heart of most of the psychological, emotional, and spiritual and heart problems in our world today. People are ashamed of things that have happened to them. They are ashamed of things they've done. They are ashamed of not doing something when they had the opportunity to step in and make something right. Shame is a major contributor to our unhappiness. And so all of that was tied into look a person in the eye when my father used to say, look someone in the eye. So, I don't know how not to look someone in the eye. In fact, it's uncomfortable for people that don't know me that I won't stop looking them in the eye. I can see that they're not happy. And I'll even say it to make them, I'll say, you don't want to look at me in the eye. That's okay. But I'm going to keep trying to find your eyes because that's the humanity and the human being within. So one of the first things my father ever taught me was look a person in the eye. And actually, he said it in the 60s way, look a man in the eye. But in today's world, it's men and women. So I've always applied it equally to anyone. In fact, when I meet dogs, I look them in the eyes. When I meet cats or animals, I try and look at the eye because the eye is such a great window of conveyance. And of course, when someone looks away or they can't, look you in the eye. It's interesting. I met someone a couple of weeks ago, somebody who cannot look me in the eye because they're blind. And so I said to them, I'm looking you in the eye just so you'll know where my eye is focused. And I just gave them that moment of kindness and respect, because I think even if they don't know what it means to be looked in the eye, I think to hear it said uh, is empowering and instills confidence in people. So in today's culture, as we disc mask or demask, however you'd like to say it, and as some of us continue to stay masked because of fear, it's important to look someone in the eye. But the concept is be authentic, be genuine, be a person of your word, be a person of integrity. The second thing my father said was do the right thing. And what he meant by that was that the world's full of corruption. The world is full of people who are out to get you. And there are opportunities that you could use to get them or get ahead. And my father did not believe in these things. His father didn't either. Our whole family uh, are strong believers. And this has a lot to do with our faith and our belief that there's a higher spiritual calling in life to always do what's right, even if the law says you can do it anyway. So there are many times where it's legally all right or acceptable to do something. For example, let's take something that recently probably many people took advantage of: tax shelters or tax tricks that you can use to shield your income and your assets. And I'm not opposed to those things. I recognize that the law provides all kinds of loopholes, but my father has a problem with that. And it's instilled in me that what's the moral thing to do? What's the proper thing to do? Even though the law says I can, ought I to do so? And so my dad particularly applied this to the work he did as a plumber and pipe fitter. He believed, and he used to say, do the job right the first time. There are no callbacks. And in all the years he owned Norman Beach Plumbing, I think we only had a couple of callbacks. And they were callbacks not because we didn't do the job right. They were callbacks because sometimes when you go and you do a job and you replace a sink or a water heater, as we explain to people who have homes that are 90 years old, the piping in the walls is 90 years old. So disturbing it is going to possibly cause another problem. And so are you sure you want to do this? Because you're going to open a can of worms. And so in those couple of cases, in fact, it did happen. But he believed if you're going to do something, do it right, take your time, because you don't want to be called back because it looks bad on your character if you do sloppy work. So don't commit to something if you're not willing to go and do it right and take the steps that you need to accomplish that task. And each of you now who are listening to this are thinking of things in your own life that you've taken the time to do right. And you probably know the old expression, haste makes waste. And when we're in a hurry, we forget things, we overlook things, we hurt people's feelings, we miss things. It's important to go slow or go at a pace that works for you, and to do a thing that's right in and of itself. There are several lines in classic films. I'm thinking of Fiddler on the Roof. Doing the right thing is its own reward. Doing the godly or moral thing pays itself. You might be alone or you might feel alone, but you're not, because often people will sacrifice and do the right thing, even though publicly it looks like they're fools, or it looks like they're the ones who've lost, which Rudyard Kipling mentions in the poem If. If you can lose or win but say nothing about it, you simply do what's right because you know it's right. And you do, in the end of it, every single day, lay your head on a pillow or something like it. And you do want to be able to be all right with yourself and have a conscience that's livable. It hasn't got to be clean necessarily. And you can try and do the right thing and things can still go very wrong or get very ugly, but at least your effort and your motive was intently pure. And so that's what he meant by do the right thing. And the final one is one of my favorites, and I've been doing it all my life, and I'll do it, I guess, until I stop breathing. He would say, son, you have to know how to choose your battles. And boy, are we in a society today that likes to fight, and verbal arguments And going back to the first thing, looking someone in the eye, these kind of tie in. We live in a world today where, as everyone listening knows, we don't often actually speak or even need to look someone in the eye. We can text them, or we can email it, and we can behave very badly and get away with it unless we're called out on it and put it in writing and not look someone in the eye and get our point across or get the last word or be vindictive or be angry. And we catch ourselves sometimes doing it. I mean, I have colleagues that are full of integrity, and in a moment of anger, they will fire off. I'm using language that we all use. They'll fire off a text or shoot off an email that they regret shooting. I always tell people, if you write it out, it's cathartic, it's therapeutic, but set it aside for 24 hours and then reread it. And if you still want to say what it is, you put in writing, which is always more difficult to read than it is to hear because it's permanent. You can reread it, and it strikes the heart in a different way. If you still want to send it, then send it. But most people won't send it. They'll redact it. They'll edit it because they don't actually mean to put it that way. And then when they get some perspective and they've cooled off and they read it, they realize, "Ooh, this is worse. This is not what I'm trying to communicate," because sometimes we choose the wrong words, or it looks different than we're actually trying to say. So be mindful of keeping intimate and personal and emotional conversations. Try very hard, if you can, to look someone in the eye. Do it face to face. This is a form of face to face. At least do something like this as opposed to just texting or emailing without context, because people are deprived of feeling and content. And we, in our culture, as you know so well, listeners, we really, in America, unlike other cultures, we depend on tone of voice, intonation. We depend on facial expressions and tone and context. All of that goes with the language. If you take all of that away and you just type a word, people are really left trying to fit it together, and it can so easily be misunderstood, and you can accidentally hurt someone's feelings, unless, of course, you're trying to hurt their feelings and you know what to say. But choosing your battles is important. And I'll share my own personal philosophy that I learned watching my father. Most battles aren't worth it anyway. And so it's best to walk away, because most battles will solve themselves if left alone. Unless it's some kind of injustice where you need to speak up and protect someone who's struggling with a disability, or they're being neglected, or they're being hurt. Of course, by all means, that's always a time to speak up or just to do something. But many battles, many verbal jousting games, we can just walk away from, and they'll go away. And people would like you to confront them and engage in the fight. They don't like it when you don't. And not that you're trying to get back at them by making them frustrated, but if you don't play the game of fighting, there's no game to play. So I intentionally walk away from, I would say, about 95%, maybe even higher, of the battles offered to me, because they're looking just for the fight. They're not really looking for the truth or the answer or even common ground. They just want to be right. And so they'll go online or they'll do whatever it is they need to do so that they can be heard or recognized. And so there aren't many battles that in my life so far I've had to actually stay and armor up and stay in it. Most of them aren't worth it. The payoff is nothing but heartache and anger and hurt feelings. And so I remember the song, and everyone listening will know the song if they don't remember it when it first came out, when Kenny Rogers sang The Gambler, because he chose a beautiful lyric that's the chorus that is based on so much wisdom collectively. You have to know when to hold them. You have to know when to fold them, as if life is about playing a game. And in some degrees, we do deal with life like it's a big game, and you have to know when to walk away and you have to know when to run. You never count your money when you're sitting at the table. There'll be time for counting when the dealing is done. And so I often will use that line, and people instantly laugh, and it diffuses the anxiety, because you have to know when to walk away, and you have to know when to run. When walking isn't fast enough, you have to know when to completely remove yourself and extricate yourself from a potentially violent and explosive situation. And I will say, what you have noticed, we're living in a culture of explosive violence every day, practically. Uh, we are informed of a new shooting or a new stabbing or a new crime or something that no longer really gets our attention, because we've become somewhat culturally numb to this level of violence. There's many reasons for that. I mean, many of the games that we play electronically, and but are themselves violent. In fact, when I was a kid in the 60s and 70s, my favorite cartoons, and they're still Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, the Roadrunner, they were violent, but they were slapstick funny, and you kind of knew that it wasn't real. But today, it's real. And we're living in a culture that feels less safe, and it's a little more scary, even for people who are younger and stronger. A lot, you never know who's carrying a gun, for example, these days. And so choosing your battles has a lot of applications in everyday life. Somebody cuts you off in traffic, it's probably unwise to try and chase them down or gun them or ride their bumper. And not that you could certainly get in a car accident, but they might pull over, pull out a gun, and just shoot you. Or even worse, they might shoot you in traffic as you're driving. We're seeing things like that. We're just living in a cowboy culture, I'm calling it. And I don't know how long that's going to last. Coronavirus has certainly exacerbated this. We'll get through it. We've always survived. None of this is new. We've gotten through everything, but we're different afterwards. And hopefully we've grown and we're more enriched and we learn. But that's only if we have the right attitude of going in it with looking a person in the eye and having integrity and trying to do the right thing and knowing what battles are worth fighting. And these three things, they kind of all work together. Ask Dad, he knows, because he's been alive long enough to be able to say with relative confidence, these things usually work, and they'll work for you for the whole of your life. And so I'd like to offer those three things that my own father and many fathers have shared with their sons and daughters over the years. And you have them to apply in your own life. If you don't have a father still living, or if you didn't have a father, perhaps you were orphaned, or perhaps you and your father don't have a good relationship or never did. Perhaps your father abandoned you. These are still good principles that maybe you learn from a mother or you learn from a father figure. I'm very sensitive to Mother's Day and Father's Day, because not everyone has good relationships with parents. In fact, it's the stuff of legend in psychotherapy and amongst pastors, for that matter, that, when all else fails, blame mom and dad, because they are the ones that brought you here. And I didn't ask to be born. And as Freud is often misquoted as saying, if it's not one thing, it's your mother. So there's a lot of funniness to it, but there is some truth to fathers and mothers. But you know what? For good, bad, and ugly, they do the best they can at the time with what they have, and not everyone has the same tools in the bag. So you can only lay blame for so long, and then you have to accept responsibility for your own life. And each of us have to walk that journey in different levels, and some learn that quicker than others. Typically, unfortunately, we appreciate mom and dad when it's too late, after they're gone. And so you all that are listening know that I'm lifelong hospice and end of life. And I believe in seizing the moment, because I think it's our only moment. And say, I love you, even if they don't say it back. Say, I'm sorry, even if they're not sorry. Do due diligence with our emotional business, so that we have no unfinished business. Even if the other person doesn't seem to respond, it's important to do the right thing. Thank you for letting me talk with you and share with you. And I hope to see you face to face one day soon. I have received my shot. I think most of us have. Most of us who plan to get one have received a shot. That itself is now become a fighting point, and that's a battle that I'm sometimes drawn into when I do workshops and talks. People will raise their hands and say, "What do I do about a member of my family that is refusing?" And it's very hard for them, um, because when you are in society, there's a certain civil obligation to other people. It's not the same as simply refusing to participate in a certain kind of activity. It does affect a lot of people, and who would have thought, except the visionaries, that something like a virus would cause such controversy. Um, Years ago, we all got MMR shots, the mumps, measles, rubella. I've been vaccinated all my life, and I'm probably alive because of it. So, and so, but I do understand people's fear and lack of education, and I don't want to. I never put people down for not understanding. I just try and find out what it is they don't understand, or what the fear is. If I try really to not talk and just listen, so I can figure out what it is they think's going to happen if they do or if they don't. And I recommend that you do the same, because I think everyone listening probably knows someone or has someone that's in a battle of some sorts. And it might even be revolving around how to re-enter society, how to restart life, and resist, if you can, saying back to normal, because as everyone listening knows, there is no normal. And the life before was hardly normal. We just made it okay. So getting back to a routine that makes us comfortable makes more sense. May the force be with you. And if you are God believers like me, may God be with all of you. And know that even though I don't see all of you, except sometimes I'll see one or two of you in Publix, know that you're in my heart. And I'm very grateful for having had a wonderful father. He wasn't perfect, but I like that part about him, because he owned his mistakes. He apologized eventually. And we were very, very close. And as many of you know, he literally died about 6 inches away from me. It was very traumatic and unexpected. But since we talked about life and death every single day for 40 years, it was not something I was unprepared for. I wish you all the very best, and happy Father's Day.